What's up, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. I guess this is gonna be my final video about Groves Eubank. I don't like to talk about myself, man, but I've been busting my ass lately. Just FYI, if you think I'm a little lethargic and, repeating myself a little more than usual, or maybe I'll stutter here and there, you know, it is what it is. I It's been working. It is what it is. Anyway, I don't know if you noticed, but I really like this fight. Primarily because it's a difficult fight to predict, right? Man, it could go so many different ways. And I like the assignment, I don't cherry pick my predictions. I go for the tough ones. It's more intriguing, it's more interesting, it's more entertaining, and this fight is rich. It has many different storylines, perception, reality. I like it. Never was I a big fan of either guy. I was really a Carl Froch fan, so to me Groves was the enemy, right? No, but I realized I was a little harsh on the guy, but I tend to be. I don't just, I'm very, I discriminate. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm a harsh critic, I suppose, but it helps me pick fights. You know what I mean? It helps me. It's good to discriminate. It's a good quality to have. Discrimination, despite the fact that you know it sounds like a bad word because somebody told you you can't choose, you can't pick and choose, right? Do what we tell you. Anyway, you know, where do we start? And this is gonna be long, but you already know that. So much to talk about. Styles make fights. I've said this many times before. A lot of you guys already understand that. I did not, this isn't my theory. This is just, it's the sweet science of boxing. Punchers beat fighters. Simply because, well, nothing simple, but with everything else being equal, what you're going to have is a fighter landing two, maybe, lighter punches and exchanging that with the puncher's one much harder shot. So, and that's where the puncher's chance comes from, right? You could be losing the fight, you could be getting your ass beat, but you could land one punch that even if it doesn't knock out your opponent, you could get a knockdown and get some points that way, or your punches just tell more and they're more visible, they make more of an impact, they impress more, and even it might, the fight could even go 12 rounds and your puncher's chance will get you the win, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that you're just knocking somebody out, even though that's like the classic example, right? The hyperbolic, the best case scenario example of explaining the puncher's chance. So, George Groves has the style advantage here. And another thing is that compounds the problem for Chris Eubank and exacerbates this puncher's chance advantage is the obvious size difference, right? George Groves, not only does he have a stylistic advantage because he punches harder because he wants to punch harder, right? He picks his shots and he really commits to his punches, right? But also because he's bigger, right? So everything else being equal, he's going to have better punch resistance and he's going to be punching harder. So, once you realize that, you got to really believe that Chris Eubank is a very special fighter to be able to overcome these disadvantages, and he could be. If only from an athletic standpoint, he's just such a phenom that he's going to walk through what George Groves has to offer, and is able to land more punches, and his punches will eventually make the difference. You know, and the thing with Groves is that he's a puncher, but he could wear the boxer or the counter puncher suit as well. So let's say he chose to just box, and he won't because he never just boxes, even though he might have done that before in his career. But if he chooses to box, well, boxers also beat fighters, so he will again compound that advantage when he's boxing Chris Eubank. Now, when he's counterpunching, he still has the stylistic advantage because he's the puncher against the fighter, but fighters beat counterpunchers also, so he's gonna get hit, is what that means. But ultimately, he's still a puncher, even though he's just counterpunching, he's still a puncher, so he still has the advantage there. So, people picking Eubank are basically telling you that, whether they realize it or not, and I think a lot of people do, they're just saying that he's just so much tougher, that his chin and toughness is just levels above, at least one level above George Groves. And we don't know that. That it's just an assumption. And you could be right, but there's nothing on record that says that this is true. And I know people talk about the Eubank chin and this and that. Some people wonder whether or not he has his father's chin. Some people say that he definitely does. This is very easy to verify, guys. You don't have to make it, that hypothetical. Just go look at photos of senior and junior, and he doesn't really have his dad's chin. Go look at the photos of his mother and him. And he has more. It's not exactly his mother's chin, but he got his mother's chin, if anything. So that's very easy to verify if you're talking about his chin. Now, determination and mental fortitude, that's completely different, I guess. But as far as his chin goes, it looks like 75% his mom's chin, actually. So, and that's not difficult to verify. See how easy that was? I know it may seem like I overanalyze stuff, but no, I just get to the very, very bottom of it, But just doing my best. I'll probably get this prediction wrong, but no, I won't. If you want it to happen, speak it, right? Put it into words. Anyway, so, what the boxing world and the bookies are telling us is that Chris Eubank Jr. is a phenom, assuming that they're not just trying to rip everybody off, which could be the case. But, I see ways in which Chris Eubank can win this fight. But again, he's getting such huge benefit of the doubt here over the more proven fighter. And, I myself can't just pick Chris Eubank Jr. based on the hype, based on the promise. There's nothing in what he's done to tell me that he's better than George Groves. I've looked at the record, man. Look, I didn't watch every single one of their fights. And honestly, guys, how relevant are some of these fights against, bums or not such good fighters that these top level fighters don't really get up for? Like, I'm not saying it's bad to look at those fights, and you could definitely glean some information from those fights, but you know, they're not as important. You know, but like I've been pointing out, there's a lot of like just different narratives, or there's one prevailing narrative, and I just don't agree with it. I'm not saying it's all wrong, but I'm asking, where's the evidence for this narrative? And you know what the narrative is, because just about everybody that's picking Eubank, and I'm not talking about, you know, there are original people out there, and people who know more about these fighters than I do, but a lot of the people predicting Eubank's destruction, not even, but his win over Groves, are saying what? Groves is past it. Everybody's saying that basically. It's Chris Eubank Jr.'s time. He's got better stamina. You know, he's the athlete here. He's just phenomenal. It's his time, right? George Groves is old. He's past it, and it's just his time. George Groves has too many miles on the odometer, and he just can't. He won't be able to deal with this guy, right? Again, we're talking about the physical here, right? We're talking about athleticism, and you're telling me the smaller guy he must be a phenom, is what you're telling me, and he could be, but I haven't seen it, so you're gonna have to convince me. I fucking hate Kool-Aid to begin with, but so I never drink that shit. But yeah, definitely not before you prove yourself. And sorry to say, Chris Eubank Jr. is not a proven fighter. He just isn't. George Groves is. We know exactly where George Groves stands. He's not the best, but he's elite. Depending on how, you know, big you make that top level. But he is, you know, as far as fighters go, all the fighters out there, he's like 1 in 1,000 kind of a fighter, right? Maybe, I don't know. You get the picture. Not as good as the best, but really up there with them. He could give anybody in the world a good competitive fight. Within, you know, reason, obviously. And you'll beat most people. Chris Eubank Jr. versus, we already know he didn't beat Billy Joe Saunders, and seeing how Billy Joe's been looking, only like the biggest fanboy will pick Eubank Jr. to beat Saunders, right? So, you know, Eubank Jr., Martin Murray, that would be an interesting fight, right? I think Eubank would win, but I think he'd get hit a lot, and he would basically just outwork Martin Murray, you know, punching at his gloves. But, you know, it's an interesting fight. If Murray has anything left, I guess we'll find out. You know what I mean? You could mix and match Eubank and all these top level fighters, and you're gonna get like all kinds of opinions from various people, right? Eubank Jr. is not gonna be favored over most top level fighters, right? Just George Groves. Okay. Oh, this guy's kind of weird, huh? Creepy as fuck. But he makes awesome videos. Anyway, you know, so there's a lot of hype around Chris Eubank Jr. And there's this like prevailing narrative that has these various parts that I just pointed out, and everybody's saying the same thing. It sounds scripted. It sounds fake. It sounds manufactured. Because when you really start looking at it, Groves doesn't have that many fights. Yeah, okay, he's been stopped before, but like he's barely a year older. He just won his first world title, right? He tried previously. This is the first time he won a world title, and now you're telling me he's shot? He wins his first world title, and he's shot. Like, come on, people. What is going on? Somebody drinking that Kool-Aid, man. So, you know, I question who scripted this narrative and released it to the public and why so many of you have picked it up and run with it, but it is what it is, man. You know, let's tackle the whole stamina question. Do yourself a favor if you really want to know and answer that question as best as you can, or maybe even confuse yourself even more. Google Groves Eubank CompuBox, and I think it's Boxing Now website that will help you out, will be your friend. But anyway, according to CompuBox numbers as per Boxing Now, and look, I don't trust CompuBox with anything other than rough estimation of the number of punches thrown. That's the only thing that I could really basically rely on them for, right? Just punches thrown. Not landed, not percentages, just punches thrown. Easy to count those, right? Anyway, so the narrative is that George Groves gasses, right, late in fights. And Eubank does not, supposedly. But when you look at the actual numbers, in fights that went 12 rounds, George Groves throws more punches in the championship rounds than Eubank Jr. does. Now, isn't that shocking? Don't you find that shocking? Right? That's not what you thought. Even if you're picking George Groves, it's not what you thought, right? Well, go look it up. So, and on average, Chris Eubank throws per round, I think, a few more punches, but it's a very, very small difference. It's not a big difference per round. And you know, his fights don't go as long, and he's got a lot of way overmatched opponents that he just tees off on, right? So, you know, again, it's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality, right? You always have to, it's a dichotomy, right? I think that's the right word. Anyway, it's not that simple. So nothing is ever that simple. So, and this is the thing. We don't know who has the better stamina. We just don't. The numbers don't support it. They definitely don't. They don't really go this way or that way. Just the sheer numbers, right? The quantity. But then when you look at the quality of opponent, you begin to see that, as if you didn't already know, that not only has Groves gone 12 rounds more times, he's also fought better level of opposition on average. Guys that, and a lot of the time, guys that come to fight and really test your fucking stamina. Who has really tested Eubank's stamina? Who tested his stamina? Who? Billy Joe, who was way out of shape. You got a dude out of shape, and you have amazing stamina, and somehow it didn't show in that fight against Billy Joe, because I think he threw like an average number of punches for a middleweight. So, and the thing about fighting top level opponents and guys that come to fight, after you're done throwing your punches, they don't let you breathe. They don't let you rest. They don't let you take your time. They go after you. Now you got to get out the way. You got to clinch. You can't just take a breather. It's not like punching a heavy bag when you set off a flashy combination and then you start, bullshitting, dancing around and taking deep breaths and recovering before you attack again, which is basically the type of opponent that Eubank's been fighting. So, if anything, I would question his stamina, seeing as he throws as many punches on average as the guy that has poor stamina at a lower weight division against lower level of opposition. If you really want to question anybody's stamina here, but, that's not the narrative, is it? But, if I had to bet and tell you who has the better stamina, I would go with Eubank, because he's fighting at his natural weight, right, basically, and Groves has to drain himself. So if they were to run a marathon, my money's on Eubank, no doubt about it. Holy shit. But it's, I don't think the difference here is as big as people make it, and they're not running a fucking marathon, okay? So that's just the thing, you know. Eubank had, for example, was in much better shape than Billy Joe, and so you'd have to assume he has the better stamina. But he, you know, he wasn't throwing a whole bunch of punches anyway, because Saunders' skill just shut him down, right? And Saunders was always dangerous. Eubank was tense in that fight. You know, he had to think more so than ever before, and you know, that depletes your stamina too. And then there's such a thing as mental stamina too. So, and again, however you slice it, they still end up throwing the same amount of punches, right? Except you're betting on the fighter here. The fighter has to outwork the puncher. Man, you know, unless he really just bum rushes him and is able to force a bullshit stoppage or really legitimately hurt him and take him out early, Eubank Groves, obviously, how does he win this fight? I don't understand it. I don't get it. You know, but as far as staminas go, it's true that Groves gets a little bit more ragged as fights go on, and you know, he looks more labored and is breathing deeper. But yeah, but that's every fighter that has a tough 12-round fight. That happens to every single fighter. But I'm not trying to say that Groves has some kind of awesome, amazing stamina. All I'm saying is that I don't think it's going to be very relevant in this fight who has the better stamina. And there's no evidence out there to suggest that Eubank has better stamina anyway. The only way you would know is if Eubank fought Martin Murray over 12 rounds, and then maybe Groves fought the same Abraham that Eubank did, and maybe, you know, if they fought the same opponents over the same distance or roughly the same distance, then you could really, truly, and honestly compare their staminas. But even then, you'd have to look at the way the fight went, what kind of a fight it was, blah, 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 and there's all these other factors. So I don't see why stamina is so important here when George Groves, and you know, the more I think about it, the more I analyze it, I feel like edging George Groves. If it wasn't for the fact that he's definitely drained at the weight, I would clearly give him the stamina edge here, because George Groves is often dealing with guys that just come at him and really test his stamina. And like that Chudinov fight, I mean, he was throwing a lot of punches, a lot of hard punches at Chudinov, and you know, maybe Chudinov was throwing more punches and his stamina was looking better, but he got knocked the fuck out. And Chris Eubank Jr. is nowhere near, technically, he is nowhere near the class of Chudinov, technically. You know, Chudinov uses a strong, hard jab straight from the guard, very direct, on the way in, and he has very responsible defense, and he comes in at angles. He doesn't come straight in, he comes in at angles, moves his head a little bit, and, you know, throws a lot of punches. He's a very difficult guy to deal with, and that's the type of guy that will test your stamina. And Groves, man, he passed that test with flying colors, all things considered, you know. Can Eubank beat Chudinov? And we don't even know that. Now I know people will just scream and yell and shout how he would kill the guy, right? But it's, get the fuck out of here. He never fought anybody like Chudinov. Never. So I don't understand why the bookies are telling me I need to put all this faith in Junior, because it's his time. And if that means that like he's gonna win by hook or crook, then, you know, I'm still not picking him. You know what I mean? I'm still not picking him. It's like, and when you think about it, the fight kind of, you get this bad feeling that there might be some corruption or bullshit going on, because, you know, it's Eubank's time. It's his time now, right? It's his time to shine. He deserves it more. So, narratives, people. But this always happens. But I disagree. We don't know who has the better stamina. If you want to question anybody's stamina, tell me why Eubank Jr. didn't throw any punches. Even late in that fight against Billy Joe, he didn't throw that many punches. Why did he throw fewer punches toward the end of the Abraham fight? He slowed down in that fight too. And it was all one-way traffic. The other guy wasn't even testing his stamina. Why did he slow down? Why didn't he pick it up? I mean, this whole stamina over 12 rounds is based on a punching bag, Abraham, and a 12-round UD or split decision to a fucking fat gypsy with terrible stamina. I'm not seeing it. Maybe he has amazing stamina, but he's never shown it. And that's just a fact. So, you know, once you begin to break down the narrative and put it to the test, you see that these things don't make any sense. And this whole idea that Groves is like not the same, you know, and by that meaning worse than he was. I mean, maybe he's not at his absolute peak, but he's for damn sure a better fighter than the guy that fought Carl Froch. And I've covered this already plenty, but I'm just going to rehash it real quick. He's a more professional, less amateurish. He's a seasoned fighter who doesn't waste as much movement, who doesn't bounce around as much. He's bigger, heavier, stronger, and it shows in the way he moves. You know, but that also makes him punch harder. And no, he doesn't have the same springy, skinny legs that he did when he was, you know, 23, 24 years old. But his legs are still very good. And he actually, even though the way he stands and how wide his feet are apart and how much he bends his knees, bends at the knees, his mobility in the crouch looks better to me today than in the Carl Froch fight. Okay? He's got better mobility in that already somewhat compromising position. And he tends to stand up a little straighter, not by much, and his feet aren't quite as wide as they were at one point. You know, he transitioned from, I'm assuming, the more amateurish fighter, like in the Gale fight, which, by the way, I only saw it once, but I had him losing. I'm not watching that boring fight again. Anyway, you know, no, he doesn't have those legs anymore, but that's because he's, what, 30 years old now? And he's just different. He's stronger, he's bigger, he's just a different fighter who learned how to move more like a professional fighter. You know, maybe he doesn't throw as many punches as he used to. I don't know. Maybe he throws more. But he's more judicious now. He picks his shots better. And, you know, I haven't seen all his fights, guys. Just the big and important ones. So that's what I'm looking at here. You know, he's more judicious and he picks his punches better. And that's understandable once you understand what it is that he does with his lead hand these days, something that he didn't used to do. He never used to probe and measure the distance with his lead hand. He never used to control his opponent. And he's not an ace at it these days, but he does it. And he's developed his game, his technique, and he's more versatile now, and he has more tools. And he's a better fighter than he was. And he's bigger and stronger than he ever was. So maybe he's not as fast, and maybe his stamina is not as good as it used to be. But it's still, he's not over the hump. I don't understand this narrative at all. It's like people don't, whatever, man. I ain't worried about people. I'm just saying, all I'm trying to say is explain to you why I'm going with the underdog here. Something I don't often do. So, you know, George Groves probes with his lead hand now. He uses it to measure the distance. He uses it to blind you, to get you to react to it. He feints with it. He probes. He looks to see how you react to the lead hand, and then he works off of that, right? A lot more. Or when you bum rush him, more so than ever before. And he's not perfect, but a lot of the times when you come at him, he will control. He'll just stick his jab out there as he moves back, right? He'll just put his hand out there and try to control you, just like this guy right here is doing, basically. And if you're breaching into his space, he pulls that hand back, the lead hand, and uses it to set up the right hand, to measure you, to know exactly where to throw the right hand. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, close your eyes, stick your lead hand, for most of you that's going to be your left hand, stick it out there, right? Close your eyes, stick your lead hand out there, and as you bring it back, try to hit it with the right uppercut, with your eyes closed, right? You're not going to have any problem hitting it exactly where you want to hit it, right? So Groves, that's basically what he does. It's one of the things he does. You know, he uses it to measure the space so that he could place that right hand where he needs to go. So he's developed the scope for his sniper rifle, you know what I'm saying? And he controls his opponents better now also. These things kind of go hand in hand. And, you know, it just gives you another thing, another look, something to think about, something to deal with. And from what I've seen, Eubank has never had to deal with an active lead hand like that, except with Billy Joe Saunders. And even then, Billy Joe Saunders didn't really have his probing, controlling game very, very tight anyway. And it was a southpaw. So, like, you know, the lead hand of George Groves, I've never seen Eubank deal with anything like that. And he's definitely not dealing with that in sparring. And even though George Groves, again, isn't the best at it, it is another wrinkle, and it makes him a better fighter. It helps him make his punches count. It has developed him as a better counter puncher, right? Just a better, more accurate puncher. Now, I don't know what the numbers are, but I guarantee you go look this up, you'll see that against a similar level of opponent, George Groves' punch connect percentage has gotten better as he's aged, right? You know, it's silly to say that George Groves is past it. It's just silly. I mean, he's only 30 years old, so he's in his physical prime. And what do you think he's been doing all these years in the gym? Just hitting the bag and hitting the pads and that's it? No, he's been working on technique and He's just a better fighter, guys. He really is. You don't knock out somebody like Chudinov if you're not a good fighter. You don't compete with Badu Jack if you're not a good fighter. Badu Jack completely destroyed DeGale, right? You want to talk about improvement, and I know it's also DeGale deteriorating, but you saw them having a very close fight. To a lot of people, could have gone either way. A lot of people thought DeGale won, right? And then as they progressed, George Groves is doing a lot better against the same level of opposition. Against the exact same guy. He's doing a lot better. And yes, it's because DeGale has deteriorated, but if you're really fair and you're really paying attention, it's also because George Groves has gotten better. So that's another part of the narrative that's used to justify picking the favorite here, Eubank, that I just disagree with, because it's just not true. Which isn't to say that George Groves couldn't lose this fight, but it's not going to be because he's somehow fallen off or deteriorated, unless he's just completely drained and he can't take a fucking punch to save his life, which I have no indication to think that that's the case. A lot has been said about the weigh-in and the way he looks, but he looks the same he's been looking always. He always looks like that. Okay, so he shaved the beard and you could see his cheeks a little bit better, and the lighting, at least on the seconds out video, was terrible, and the white balance was off. It was too much red and not enough yellow. Even Chris Eubank looked pale, right? Obviously paler than he normally does. He didn't look as brown because the white balance was off. And as far as George Groves, being skinny and drawn, well, that's just who he is. This is just what he does. And he's 29 years old, so it's not likely to be that big of a deal at this point in time. Not yet. If he keeps doing this, yeah, it's gonna fuck him up long term. But he's been doing this for a while, and I'm sure, he's nailed it, and he makes weight probably better than maybe he did 2-3 fights ago. But no doubt about it, he's drained, right? A lot of fighters are drained. David Lemieux has always looked like shit on the scales and kept knocking dudes out. Charlo looked like death at 154, right? He still looks drained at 160. It just kept knocking dudes out. So, they're really... I'm not saying that... Obviously, George Groves is going to be stronger if he moves up to 175. No doubt about it. But, yeah, he's losing something on those scales. But that is just something he's been doing. He looked the same to me, anyway, as he did in the Cox weigh-in. And he looked basically the same against Murray. Or rather... Murray was hard to tell because he had that big beard. But Chudinov, this is just what he looks like. So, people could read into that whatever they want. I just don't. I think it's like wishful thinking mostly and all that. So, and as far as the whole confidence and mind games and all that stuff, I've already covered it. Like, I think it's important. I think it's relevant sometimes. But ultimately, it's not something you could really predict a fight on, because there's just not, in my opinion, there's just not enough information out there to be able to really honestly judge how confident a guy is, or whether one guy is in the other guy's head, or sometimes it's obvious, but and I don't know. To me, it's not that relevant. I thought, but if we want to talk about it, and I always find it interesting, George looked very focused and like in the zone on the during the stare down, and he was intense, right? Maybe he was trying to intimidate Eubank Jr. a little bit with the stare, and I think maybe it worked a little bit because Eubank Jr. had that little smile, which, you know, some people think it's, and this is another thing, like it's so subjective and you don't really know. Some people think, oh, it's just confident and he's taking it, he's relaxed and all those things. And, sometimes smiles mask nervousness also. Like they're nervous smiles. And I don't know what kind of little smile it was, but he was doing a lot of talking and George was just focused. He was just in the zone and focused, and Eubank was relaxed. And it's good to be relaxed in the fight, no doubt about it, but not too relaxed, you know what I mean? So I don't generally, even though it's like fun to talk about and it's, it could be relevant if like you really follow these guys' careers and there's certain patterns you notice and you've done it like that. Yeah, I think that stuff might be relevant, but it's not going to make or break a fighter, and it's not going to make a huge difference in the fight unless somebody is just obviously scared or just freezes up. But I didn't see that from either guy, and again, Groves looked focused, and Junior still, it looks like he's playing games, but it could just be, a put on, right? It could be fake. But, he doesn't look all that serious. And I think this is a serious fight. But it may mean something, it may not mean anything. Don't think it's going to make a difference in this fight. It's really going to come down to what boxing generally comes down to. Skill, strength, and desire, and experience. So the skill gap is just so big between these two guys that I mean, you got the bigger guy, the harder punching guy, the guy with the stylistic advantage, and he is also more skillful. Like, come on, like, give me something here, Eubank, other than promise to do great, just like going into the Saunders fight, right? A lot of hope, a lot of hype, a lot of promise, very flat performance. So, and this is the thing, if we're talking about improving or not being the same fighter. Obviously, Chris Eubank Jr. has improved. His combination punching is a little better. He's a little sharper. His punch technique is a little better. You're on that bag or on those pads just practicing the same punches and combinations and just drilling stuff over and over and over. And you're still young and learning, yeah, you're going to get better. All that is going to be improved, right? The mechanics. Yeah, definitely his mechanics have improved. But as far as technical boxing skill, I'm not really seeing much improvement. And that could be because he's not being tested in that ring. So he's not really showing us what he has. But that could also be because he's not learning anything on the job, just knocking over the same kind of opponent. I mean, you want to say he's gotten better at knocking out a bum or a certain type of opponent, certain style, tailor-made. That's cool. He's gotten better at doing that, no doubt. But that's not who he's fighting right now. He's fighting a Billy Joe Saunders. And okay, yeah, I know. They're not the same. They're very different. There's no doubt about it. But let's not pretend like Billy Joe Saunders isn't more like George Groves than everybody else Eubank fought. Let's not pretend like, if we are going to make comparisons and look for similarities, Groves and Eubank are more similar than they are different, and they're definitely, Saunders is definitely more similar to Groves than he is to these come forward punching bags, right? So no, they're not exactly the same, but it's a whole different class, and it's a whole different group of styles. Like they're not the same style, because Billy Joe Saunders is, he's very versatile. He could do whatever he wants, Billy Joe Saunders, but he's primarily a boxer, I would say. Counter puncher, but primarily a boxer. So that's a lot more like, just from a stylistic perspective, that's a lot more like George Groves, who could wear that suit too. He could be a boxer, but he's going to be a boxer puncher, right? He's going to hit harder than Billy Joe. You know, and guys, whenever you're predicting fights, obviously punching power and chin ratio is always important. The stylistic matchup is always important. But the thing that I find that is one of the best predictors of who wins is the footwork. More often than not, the guy with the better footwork. And it's not always, but the guy with the better footwork almost always wins. But obviously, you got to know what the better footwork is and how they match up too. But if there's a big difference in how you move your feet in sync with your hands, the guy that's better at that almost always wins. And when you watch Eubank Jr. hit the pads, or first of all, there's not even that much footage of him hitting the heavy bag, right? Because the heavy bag moves. I'm sure there's some footage of him hitting the double end bag. I've never seen it. You know, I'm sure there's footage of him. Well, I know there's footage of him sparring, but you know, whenever you see him hit the pads with the pad man, not the stationary machine or whatever the fuck that thing is, he doesn't look very fluid, right? And his trainer isn't really, the pad man isn't really giving him much footwork. You know, they're not really in sync. They're not moving well together. The guy holding the pads, if he is moving, he basically has to stop in one place, plant his feet, wait for Eubank Jr. to do the same thing, rattle off a combination, get out of there, and then, you know, repeat. There's not a lot of punching while on the move. He's not really stepping into a lot of these punches. He's not like intercepting the opponent, if you will. He's not really finding these pads wherever they may be. It's just like, it's basically the same as him hitting those pad stations. Basically, it's just a big fat guy with a midsection guard, or whatever it's called, bodyguard, and some pads. But it's, you know, it's very robotic. It's not very fluid, and the guy basically has to be stationary for Eubank to look good. Okay. Go watch Eubank Jr.'s shadow boxing. It's better than Deontay Wilder, but it's not much better than Deontay Wilder. It just, his hands and his feet aren't really all that synced up. and he doesn't really punch on the move very well. They're synced up when he's up on you and he's dipping from one uppercut to the next. He's pretty good. He's okay, but even then the punches aren't very. He's not very accurate with his punches, and I just feel like he's gonna have issues with a mobile target, just like he did against Billy Joe Saunders. And that's really the similarity, a mobile fucking target that is quick, can counter, and throws meaningful shots back at you. Man, I'm sure there's a ton more stuff that... How long is this video? Almost an hour? Jesus. I could sit here and keep breaking this fight down and keep talking about it, but I'll probably just start repeating myself. And I think I've done a good enough job of getting my point across. But make no mistake, the fight's not easy to predict, mainly because we just don't know about Chris Eubank Jr. We just don't know. We don't know how good his chin is. We don't know how good his stamina is. We don't really know how hard he punches at world level. We don't know, man. We don't know. And I'm not gonna, give my vote of confidence to an unknown that, just to repeat myself one last time, that is smaller, doesn't hit as hard, has comparable stamina, has less boxing skill, is stylistically tailor-made for his opponent, and never proved himself at world level while his opponent has. Right? Okay, so he's faster. And people say he's the better inside fighter, even though that's debatable. That's very much debatable. He's faster, more explosive. We know that for a fact. He's faster and more explosive. And is the better combination puncher. Okay? But other than that, unless I'm overlooking something, Groves has all the advantages, experience included. Experience! So, man, I can't pick. Basically, it's like, I'm not saying George Groves is the best shit since sliced bread, that George Groves can't lose. We obviously know he can. But I just can't put my money on an unknown quantity that's for damn sure out of a huge disadvantage. Has George Groves has more advantages than disadvantages in this equation, and the few advantages that Chris Eubank has, they don't seem to be, it doesn't seem like there's a huge gap between them. Like, okay, he's faster, but not that much faster. Okay, he throws more punches in 5 seconds, but George Groves is more judicious, and he makes his punches count more, and he's more accurate. And the one thing that really people are banking on here is athleticism. Whether you're talking about his chin, or his speed, or stamina, all these things that some of them aren't even true. It's really the physical. It's his athleticism, the whole package, that you're banking on going up against all these disadvantages. And even the athleticism itself, you have to assume, is going to be undermined because he's the smaller guy. So, I'm sorry. I just don't see how Chris Eubank wins this fight. But As far as how I think the fight is going to go, is I think it's going to be slow and cagey in the beginning. I think Eubank is going to either get cracked with a counter, or see that the counters are coming, that Groves is ready, and I think either the threat of the counter or the actual counter itself is going to take away a lot of Eubank's confidence, and it's going to make him timid, and it's going to make him not throw very many punches, and he'll probably open up a little bit more later in the fight, but it's not going to be enough to win a credible decision. So I'm picking George Groves by decision. Obviously, there are other potential scenarios here. If Chris Eubank Jr. just jumps him and goes haywire and tries to force the stoppage, I don't think he's going to get a credible stoppage, because George Groves is going to hit him back and make him do something different, or he's going to knock him out. If Eubank keeps pressing, keeps attacking, and keeps trying to force the stoppage against Groves is going to knock him out. You know, if he wants to test Groves' stamina late, give up some of the early rounds and test his stamina late, he's not going to do enough. It's not going to be enough. George Groves is going to be strong enough late. He's going to throw enough punches late. He's going to always have the power to shut Eubank down or knock him out. I just don't see Chris Eubank Jr. walking through all these punches. And even if he does have his father's chin, which he clearly does not if you go look at the photos, you know, there's also such a thing as body punches. But, you know, given the immense amount of hype that there seems to be behind Chris, I'm going to succumb to it, I suppose, and give him the benefit of the doubt and say that, well, I don't know. I mean, if he is so great, he'll just go after George Groves and he'll get knocked out. But maybe not. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe he can take what George Groves dishes out, but he's not going to be willing to sell out like Cox, right? He's not going to be willing to sell out like Chudinov, because that means he's going to get knocked out. Are people honestly telling me that he's 100% better than Chudinov? He's that much better than Chudinov, when we don't even know if he could beat that guy. Anyway, man, I'm rambling. This video's long enough. I just think George Groves' skill, punching power, presence, you know, desire to win is going to make Eubank Jr. 50% of the fighter we normally see against these scrubs, okay? And that's not going to be enough to beat George Groves. But if he wants to sell out, the referee is going to jump in and stop. But I'm going with Groves, UD, provided everything is on the up and up. And I think it is. So I hope you enjoyed my extended breakdown. I'm sure there's lots of stuff I've forgotten, would like to add, but I like this fight, man. This fight has made me think. It's made me ponder. It's made me watch fights and reassess fighters and you know, change my opinion on George Groves. Admit that I wasn't giving him enough credit. And, you know, maybe that's a reaction to seeing how much credit Eubank is getting for not having done anything. But it is what it is, man, you know. George Groves is gonna win this fight. Am I super confident? No. I just know he's going to win.